Blood of Dawnwalker was the cover spotlight of the recent Game Informer magazine, and we got a lengthy article with all sorts of Dawnwalker news, including getting to see the game's full map. Since most of the info today is being pulled from that Game Informer article, I'll leave a link down below to their magazine. And let's start off with what I consider to be the most interesting, best news of today's video, and that is, of course, the world map, as you can see right here. And most of you should be aware now that the Blood of Dawnwalker is an open world game, so you'll be able to go to pretty much anywhere on this map, I think mostly at any time once you get through the prologue of the game. But let's talk about what we're actually looking at right here. It's not insanely high resolution, so when I zoom in, things are going to get blurry, but that's okay. So this is the map of Val Sangora, which is a fictional setting, but it's based on the Carpathian Mountains, which are in Central and Eastern Europe in the 14th century. Specifically 1349 is the date of this map. So although it's a fictional setting, it's based on a lot of realism. And you're going to notice right away that we have 4 vampires on this map, each one taking up a corner here. Up here in the top left is Brensis, who is like the vampire overlord, and he used to be a Roman senator. We have Ambrus up here in the top right. In the bottom left, we have Bakir, who is from Central Asia. And then in the bottom right, if you can see, if my webcam is not in the way, is Xanthi, who is from a remote Greek island long ago in the past. And each of these vampires is going to kind of rule their own section of this map, with the exception of Brensis, who rules everything. So these are basically Brensis's generals, and the map is divided up into fiefdoms, with the exception of the central city here of Svartrau, I guess, being collectively ruled by all of them. With that said, Brensis's castle that basically overlooks Svartrau city, so I'm sure everybody's on their best behavior, and he's the one that basically rules it. The devs told us that this map will include several different biomes. We have swamps, there's going to be forests, mountains, caves, and mines, and then also secret areas that are tied to the vampires. And actually, in some of the promotional material that we've seen, and even some of the gameplay presentation, I'll have that pop up on the screen right now, you can see the player Cohen enter into what appears to be possibly a different plane of existence. It's very red, very vampire themed, and maybe you can see spirits here, and somehow it's associated with vampires. We don't know much about it, but that is also going to be on this map. You just don't see it because it's layered over it in some way, shape, or form. We're told that this world is going to be large enough to feel expansive, but they also made it small enough to where they could make it very content dense. They wanted to focus more on gameplay systems rather than just sheer scale, is words directly from them in the article. And keep in mind, there's a lot of verticality on this map as well. The devs talk about this, of course, in the city, going up and down buildings, but this is a mountainous terrain, a valley, and there's mountains everywhere. And we're going to be able to use our vampire powers to help us traverse the environment and go up and down mountains. And, you know, you'll have shadow step and plane shift and the ability to hold your claw out and slide down large cliff edges and stuff like that. So verticality is going to make this map even bigger than what we're looking at right now. But let's go ahead and see what has been revealed to us for locations. So number 1 right here is Laslia Glen, which is up here in the north, and this is actually where Cohen is from and where his family's village is. So I'm gonna assume we start the game up here at the top of the map, and once we get out of the prologue and we get into the, you know, the open world part, we're probably gonna start working our way south. I would assume most people will go to Svartrau city, and then you just go off from there wherever you want to go. Number 2 is the Briar Sloughs, which are just below Laslia Glen, and these are, you know, it's a slough, so it's very marshy swampland type territory. Over here to the right of that, we have the Maragir Wields, so a forest area, as you can see, an area that probably doesn't have a ton of civilization in it. Then we have St. Tina's Grove over here south of the Wields, and St. Tina is actually one of 2 saints of the valley, and she was known for basically being a doctor. She could cure all illnesses that came her way and heal wounds, etc. And actually, I do have a picture. Let me bring it up right here. This is a picture of St. Tina's Convent, can see some nuns over here, you know, doing some sort of ritual or something. And, you know, it was said that a lot of them died when the death plague came. So I'm not exactly sure what's left of this place or how it operates, but it's certainly interesting. And over here to the west and a little bit north, we have Boar's Back. I'm not exactly sure what that is. I think it's possible that the Uriashi, it's a type of humanoid creature that has horns coming out of their heads, might be from this area. I'm not 100% sure. Actually, I'll show you guys Uriashi right here. This is what they look like. But when the vampires took over the valley, the Uriashi started coming out, and they're actually can be found in the city of 𝑠vartRow now. And they come from these little rock huts, and also they come from caves. And here's a picture of the Uriashi village, so I'm not exactly sure. They're from somewhere on this map. Maybe it's actually a little bit more to the south, because right here we have the rock falls over here, so the Uriashi could be from this area. That would make sense. And then southeast of that, we have an area called the Salts right here. You can see a bunch of riverways. And then east of that, all the way to the right side of the map right here above my head, we have the Tantart's Woods, or Tantar's Woods, or Tantart, I'm not exactly sure, but another forested area. A lot of forest on this map, which I love to see. And then, of course, smack dab in the middle, we have the city of 𝑠vartRow, and then Brensis's castle kind of overlooking the city. So it's pretty cool to see the full map of the game, and I really like this hand-drawn artistic touch that they have. We did see the in-game map a little bit in some of the gameplay presentations, and that also looks pretty good as well, but it's nice to see it in its entirety here. And I think it's cool how the city of 𝑠vartRow is basically center, just south of center of the map, so everything's going to, of course, you know, sprout off from the city, and the city will be a central hub, I'm assuming, for many of our activities. Now let's get into a variety of different gameplay topics, and some of this is actually new information as far as I'm aware. Let's start off with some information on the combat. So as most should already be aware, Dawnwalker does feature both a directional combat system where you'll be attacking and blocking from different directions to land hits on opponents and more vulnerable, you know, less protected or blocked areas, as well as protecting yourself from incoming attacks from different directions. But the game will also feature an optional omnidirectional system for those who don't like directional combat, or perhaps maybe it's an accessibility issue and it's just not ideal for you. Well, when Rebel Wolves first announced this omnidirectional system, I was just assuming that it was basically, you know, activating an easy mode in the game. And while that may still be partially true, I won't know until I get my hands on it, there's actually a drawback to the omnidirectional combat system, and that is that it's a combat system that will actually pull more heavily from your stamina. So the stamina consumption is going to be higher when you're using omnidirectional versus directional combat. So until we get to see it, we can't really tell, you know, what's an easier combat style. You would think it's still a little bit easier not dealing with the directions, but you know, in terms of eye-hand coordination at the very least, but it appears to actually be more difficult when it comes to stamina management. And I find this super interesting, as initially I was thinking that I would never be using the omnidirectional system, as I didn't want to make the game easier, and I actually like directional combat in most games. I know a lot of people don't, but I do. I find it to be more engaging. But now I find myself interested in potentially using both of these systems, maybe swapping back and forth if I'm able to. I think you can, as I go through the game, because they both seem to have their own challenge, which is pretty cool. Now, for those who may be worried about difficulty now, as maybe you were excited for the omnidirectional system to make the game easier on you, and now you're a little bit worried because it's going to have more stamina consumption and you have to manage stamina, let's not forget that the game will be offering 4 different difficulty options. You're going to have story, normal, duelist, and also nightmare. So I wouldn't worry too much about difficulty regardless of what system you use, as you can control, you know, the base difficulty. So you can always play on easy, of course. But interestingly enough, we also learned in the article that there will be some custom difficulty settings that you can adjust outside of the 4 difficulty presets. And what those options are, I'm not exactly sure, but this is new information as far as I am aware. We also learned the reasoning behind the directional combat system, why it's like such a focus for this game, and that is immersion. As Conrad wants you to be in the action and then stay in the action, versus a game where you're just pressing buttons and kind of watching what's happening on the screen, but it can cause moments of you coming out from it. You're not fully paying attention. You're talking to somebody, you're looking to the right, still pressing buttons. He wanted Dawnwalker, of course, to have this directional combat system, so you're always in it and it's intense and you're in the fight and you're not going to be pulled out of it. Now, of course, whether you like that or not is going to be subjective, but I totally get what he's saying here, and I appreciate devs that have mindsets like this to give us something different. And he also elaborated a bit more on the omnidirectional combat system and stated that this system will be more akin to a standard parry-based combat system. I'm not sure if it's going to feel like Souls, if it's going to feel like, Crimson Desert, who knows, but something like that, a little bit more, I don't want to say generic because it doesn't have to be generic, but a little bit more of what people are used to. So yeah, we'll wrap that up for the combat and get into another topic. And that is, of course, going to be time mechanics in this game. And I think we could have deciphered this, from looking at the gameplay. Maybe they mentioned this before, but we have official confirmation that there's going to be 8 segments of time per day and then 8 segments at night. And then, of course, you're going to reach 30 days total to complete the main quest of the game, which is to save your family if you choose to do that. The game doesn't end after the 30 days, but that main story that you're so immersed into of saving your family from Brensis is going to be a 30-day time limit with 8 segments in the day, 8 segments at night. And we already know that quests and character interactions, they can cost certain amounts of time segments and move time forward. But we also learned that skills can also use up time segments. When you invest into certain skills, it's going to cost some of your time, which is very interesting. It's not something I expected. I'm staying very open-minded about this. I was very surprised that investing into skills was going to cost time, but I'm kind of excited to see what they're going at here, because we're also told that this has gone through a ton of testing and a ton of different iterations, this whole time system. One of the iterations we were told felt like the time mechanics were far too aggressive, and it was leaving the testers and the devs not really feeling that pleasant because it was that aggressive feeling. It was like you're always on a clock and you felt like it was just too stressful and it just wasn't that fun. Then they also had an iteration of the time mechanics where there was too much time, which led to players not feeling any sense of urgency, which is important in this game. So ultimately, I guess they arrived at the perfect spot, according to Conrad, which is great to hear. And that's kind of a blend between those two other iterations. And let me just mention, for those of you guys that don't know much about the time system, when you're just exploring and, looting and doing, non-quest related stuff, just open world activities and stuff like that, time will not go forward. It's only very specific things. It's certain quests, and it might even be all quests, certain character interactions, and also investing into skills, all of which you'll know before the time goes forward, so you don't have to actually do that. Now I want to talk about relationships. So relationships will be an important part of Dawnwalker, including a few romantic ones. So we talked about the infamy system in a previous video, which is as you basically do things that piss off the vampire lords, it's going to affect the world around you. It's going to affect the laws that they have in place. It's going to make more guards be active and stuff like that. That's going to affect the game on a more macro level. Relationships in Dawnwalker are going to be choices that are tracked individually on a much more detailed level. And there's a lot of reactivity to your choices in the quests in this game, and NPCs might remember certain things that you do and then react to that in other places in the game. We're told that we can build relations not only through dialogue, but also through our actions. And there's going to be a lot of different activities and quests in this game that will allow for relationship building or perhaps deteriorating. Now, some of these activities are going to be flashy and involve combat and magic and stuff like that. And other relationship building type things are going to be more subtle, just talking to certain NPCs, the way you speak with them, or offering help to them, and it might not be combat related, and all of this will build your relations, and sometimes romance may actually come out of it. The important part of romance to the Dawnwalker devs is that they really want to, or they're telling us that they really want to take care of the details and create these romanceable NPCs as people that are really rich and interesting. versus generic or just not fully fleshed out characters. So this is great to hear. And you're of course going to have to build your relationship up with these characters, you know, to a certain point in order to achieve that romance. And we are aware that Anka, who is an herbalist in Val Sangora, somebody who knows Cohen, this is going to be a potential romance for Cohen. Also in this article, we didn't really learn this, as I do believe they mentioned it before, but I'm going to say it again. This is a saga, and the devs wanted to allow for vampire stories to span generations and geographical locations. So they're creating an IP here where you can travel through the ages, which will help keep things fresh and exciting for the studio. So if Blood of the Dawnwalker is successful, we might see many more Rebel Wolves vampire-themed games in the future. So this one is, of course, 1300s, Carpathian Mountains, but maybe we go to ancient Greece sometime. Maybe we go to Asia. Who knows? The possibilities are endless. And it's exciting to be here for the first game. I hope it turns out to be really good, and then we can enjoy this for, who knows, maybe decades to come. We also got a little bit more information on Cohen's vampire form. As we already know, when you're in vampire form, Valkyrie form, you have a bunch of Valkyrie abilities, and we know of the Shadow Step type ability where you can teleport around in a way. We have the Plane Shift where you can scale up walls, and we have the Claws, of course, which you use in combat, and you can slide down buildings. But we're also told that there will be special sword techniques when in vampire form. So we already know that when you're in human form, you can use a sort of human type magic as well as a sword for your weapon. And when you're in vampire form, you have the claws, but you can also pull out a sword in vampire form as well. And now we know that there's going to be special sword techniques just for vampire form, which is actually really exciting to hear. And then they said also something about blowing up people with magic while in vampire form, so they'll explode into pools of blood. I'll leave it at that. And to end the video, we're going to talk a little bit more about the sandbox narrative aspects of this game, which is the big selling point. And of course, you get to choose what quests you want to accept in this game, what NPCs you want to talk to, whether or not you want to follow through with a quest. And I have an example here, which is from the prologue of the game, and I'm not going to tell you the different consequences or the ways it can play out. I'm just going to set it up here. Cohen's father will ask Cohen to find an herbalist to help their mother who is not eating. She hasn't been eating for a few days. And you don't have to do this at all, or you can do it and focus on it, or perhaps you get distracted and enough time passes or whatever, and you end up not doing it in time. There's different consequences for how you choose to go about this. And I think that's really cool. And there's a ton of different examples of this if you read the Game Informer article, as Game Informer got to watch Rebel Wolves play through the prologue. And a lot of this is set up right away in the prologue of the game before you even get to the big open world, do whatever you want. You already see evidence of that in the prologue, which is great to see. Rebel Wolves' lead quest designer says that the usual playthrough will be going into the world, finding all these different narrative threats that you can follow, and deciding what you feel is worth your time. And the early entries in the Fallout games were used as inspiration for this sandbox narrative idea and design. And Rebel Wolves even says that they wanted to achieve an almost pen and paper level of freedom, which is amazing to hear, especially for all of us Baldur's Gate 3 fans, as BG3 kind of has that vibe as well.
𝑔𝑎𝑚𝑒 baptizo in nomine Dei. Amen.
Direct quote from Rebel Wolves: to finish the Blood of Dawnwalker, all you need to do is storm the antagonist's castle, face them in combat, and rescue the family. There are no additional requirements or prerequisites that you need to tick off, which means that all the stories that we prepared for the players are somewhat optional. Of course, we do encourage the players to follow these narrative threads, to explore the world, to learn all these stories, to experience what we prepared for them, which will make the attack on the castle much, much more approachable. So super interesting to hear this. You can just go right for the castle and try to save your family. And if you can pull it off, you can complete that main quest very early on in the game. But how hard it is to do this, I'm not sure. I'm sure it's going to be insanely difficult, but it'll be super cool to see some creative players on YouTube and stuff come up with crazy ideas and somehow get this quest done, maybe on day one or two, but I think most of us are not going to be doing that, nor will we be seeking to do that, because we want to experience this game and all of its content, as we have 50, 70 plus hours of content to explore. And of course, Cohen being human in the day and then vampire at night being a Dawnwalker, this will add into and play into the Sandbox narrative, as NPCs will react differently depending on the time of day and whatever form Cohen is in, of course, and quests will play out in different ways as well. So if you complete a quest at night, it might play out very differently than if you do it in the daytime. And this is also going to tie into gameplay and how you're able to tackle quests. And I'll end this with another quote from Rebel Wolves, and this is actually, I don't know how to pronounce Polish names. I'm embarrassed. I got to figure these out. We have this narrative sandbox structure of the game where we let you out into the world. You have the main goal, and then you have all these different quests and activities. On purpose, we don't call them main or side quests, just quests. Some of them are bigger, some of them are smaller, and they can chain together or not. If you don't watch for Cohen's hunger, you might cut off some stuff or kill some NPC that you actually care about. It can be controversial, but at the same time, what's really important to us is to make you feel like you actually have to deal with this vampiric hunger all the time. It's always present with him, and I feel without it, you're basically kind of just a superhero with some special traits. I think it adds an additional layer of weight and darkness to his adventure. So we're talking about Cohen's blood hunger here. If you don't feed enough, you end up losing control, and you could kill an important NPC if you're in that crazy blood hungry state and you haven't managed it. Some crazy stuff can happen, have some serious consequences. And like he said, this can be controversial, but for me, sign me up. I need my RPGs to have real consequence, not a bunch of BS or lighthearted, or we're just going to be fantasy land and everybody loves each other and nobody can die. Nah. Make that blood hunger matter. And if I'm going to rip out a family member or a friend's throat because I didn't manage my hunger, it's only going to make the moment-to-moment gameplay that much more serious and managing my character that much more meaningful. I am all for it. That's going to be it for this video. I'm really excited for this game, and the whole sandbox narrative part of it is really what's pulling me in. Of course, I love the setting and the maturity and the darkness behind what appears to be the dialogue and the characters, but the sandbox narrative aspects, the spider web of different outcomes and ways you can handle things, is super interesting in my opinion. And even if the rest of the game is feeling a little bit more AA, like maybe sometimes the combat or just general gameplay might not feel like insane AAA quality, although AAA isn't necessarily good these days, the sandbox narrative, if they do that aspect well, I have a feeling this could be a really interesting and fun game, and that's what I'm really looking forward to. So thank you guys so much for watching. I have a lot of lore that we're going to get into on Dawnwalker over the coming months. I'm already preparing one for hopefully this week. I lied to you last Dawnwalker video. I don't think I'm lying this time, so keep an eye out for that, and I'll catch you all on the next one.